welcome back to the garage. So this week we are obviously continuing with the 1987 Chevrolet S10 project. This week we are moving on to the final body work of the cab, and we've got a whole lot to do. Okay, so now that our epoxy's dried and everything, we're at a point where we can now continue on. Now, our technical data sheet for this particular primer states that if we're going to put any filler over it, we have to wait 48 hours for it to fully cure. So we've done that. You've noticed I've masked around the windshield frame here. There's a reason for that. So this is where the windshield urethane is going to go. Now, I was recommended by the person who will be installing the windshield in this truck to do this. The reason for that being, the windshield urethane that they use and the urethane primer they use will actually adhere better to the epoxy than it will to a painted surface. Which means by masking this off, we are much more likely for our windshield to seal better. Plus, it's not a big deal to do it right now anyway. So if he says it's going to seal better and he's been doing windshield for 35 years, then that's what we're going to do. Now, in addition to that, I've been working on the cab floor here. So I seam sealed the entire inside of the cab, and I've gone ahead and given it a coat of paint to seal it up. You can see, honestly, this floor really isn't in bad shape, aside from what we had to rebuild up in this corner here. Overall, pretty good. So I have a set of plugs to go in the floor still, in those two spots. And while I was in here, we had a broken off seat stud. So I took and cut a bolt that's the same thread pitch as the rest of the seat studs and welded that in there. I also extracted, let me grab it here for you. I also extracted the one seat belt bolt that broke when we were disassembling the truck. So that was, of course, this one here. So what I ended up doing is, as you can see, I welded a nut on top of the broken stud, and then I heated it from underneath with the torches till they were nice and orange. And then I was able to back off and spin out the broken bolt. So you guys have seen me do that before. So I've done that on the cylinder head. I've done that on quite a few other things on other vehicles as well. That's something I've done a lot in my trade. So moving around to this side here, I'll show you what we look like on this side now. Now, I'm trying to find if I can see if there's some type of OEM style replacement matting for the firewall for sound deadening. If not, it's not a big deal because I was already planning to put down some type of sound deadening material on the floor, the back of the cab, the roof, you know, everywhere to try and quiet it down in here and make the truck a little bit more comfortable and enjoyable to drive. Okay, so moving along to our final body work, there's a lot of little pinholes and stuff here. I'm hoping that the camera focuses enough to really show you, see? So this is what we need to fix prior to our sealer being applied. And there's not, I shouldn't say there's a lot. There's a couple spots here or there where we have pinholing going on, right? And there's also a couple spots where, like around in this corner here, it's hard to see with your eyes, but there's a little spot here that needs fixed. Right here, this needs squared up a little bit. And then right here, this needs a little bit of filler work. Like there's a lot of just little refinements that we need to make still prior to moving to paint. But that's why we do that now. So what we will be using is dry guide coat. Now, compared to the guide coat we were previously using, which is a spray, kind of what happens is, and why I prefer to use the dry guide coat when we get to final bodywork. We'll come back here to where we have a pinhole, and what we'll notice is, obviously our pinholes and sand scratches are very fine at this point. With a spray guide coat, what happens a lot of times is it will actually go over and cover where the pinhole is rather than fill it in and highlight it. So you'll sand and you'll think you've got everything nice and straight and clean like we thought we had here. And then we'll come to find that, in fact, no, there's still more pinholes to be filled. Whereas the powder, because it's a powder in dry guide coat, it will actually fill in these little pinholes and highlight them. So that's why that's my preference. So I have spent the vast majority of today blocking the truck. And blocking it some more. So that one's got 180 on it. That one's got 320. And what I've been doing is coming in here and I work the guide coat with the 180 and then I finish it with the 320. What that leaves me with is a very, very, very smooth panel basically to work off, right? So you can see I've done the majority of this side of the cab. I still have to do the rocker because that means getting down low to work on it. Done the majority of the back of the cab here. I'm just working on doing the coves here. I've done 2 out of the 7 so far. And you can see that there's still the odd low spot, high spot, pinhole, etc. that we have to go back and fix. But that is why we're doing this. Because what I want to do is get this truck and all the surfaces of it to be like a piece of glass before I lay my final coat of primer, because I'm going to put the urethane primer on it next. I just wanted to show you up close here, if the camera will focus, that this is kind of what we've got ourselves to work with now. And I know it doesn't, it's hard to tell looking at it here, but hopefully you can see just how smooth and flat our panels are now, right? Because your primer and your paint will fill some sand scratches, but not very deep. Nor do you really want it to either, right? So that is what we're working on. So to deal with the pinholes and other stuff we have, what we'll be using is a finishing glaze. So it's essentially a spot putty. It's a 2-part though, so it doesn't shrink like the lacquer-based ones that you used to see all the time, like the little Bondo, the red stuff. So we'll use this, and the whole thing with it is it sands extremely easy. So it's meant to fill in our pinholes and sand scratches and just any little imperfections that are left now at this point in our bodywork. Okay, so at this point I've gone ahead and I've sanded all of the door jamb, and I've done the rocker on this side, which I still have to go back and fill these holes. I'll just drill them out and plug weld them. Notice I've started putting some of the spot putty in here, which, as I mentioned, is very, very fine. And that's why it's only meant to fill just minor imperfections. So they're all little pinholes all in here. That's what I found when I started going through it here. And I'll show you what they look like. Because there's still a few down here at the bottom that I have to fill. So let me get the camera to focus. There we go. So you see those little dots? Every one of those dots is a pinhole from the filler. So we have to fill those in because our primer will not. So tomorrow I'll start working on this side of the truck, and then we'll move to the firewall and we'll finish with the roof. And then once that is all sanded down to 320 like I've done here, I'll go ahead and spot putty any of the little spots that we find. We'll go ahead and block that down until we're at 320. And then we will be moving on to our urethane primer surfacer. And once that is on the cab, we will actually be painting the firewall of this truck, hopefully this week. And once the firewall is painted and cleared and cured, we can start getting ready to put the cab back on the frame, which is something I'm very happy about. Anyway, hopefully I have not bored you to death completely this week. Unfortunately, this is the boring part of a project. This is all the stuff that most of the shows on TV don't show you. The hours and hours and hours and hours that are spent blocking, sanding, filling, priming, blocking, sanding, filling, priming, blocking, sanding, filling, priming over and over and over again in order to prepare for that couple hours that completely changes the look of your vehicle, your paint. So anyway, thank you for watching, and hopefully you come back next week when, well, we're going to be doing a lot more of this again.